Hello and welcome again to AI Ramblings with Neal Makwana, the handsome lad over there. Myself, Michael Parekh. This is episode 14, and boy, we have a lot of things to go through, so we'll talk a little faster. Well, maybe not. Well, this week, news of the week, Neil. Earnings season. The train keeps barreling through. Mag 7. Last week, we had both Google and Tesla. Google up, Tesla not so up. And this week, it's the two M's and the two A's. So you got the Microsoft and Meta, and then you have Apple and Amazon. Not in any of those orders, but by the end of this week, we will generally learn three things. They all believe in AI, more or less. Apple too, but they don't talk as loudly about it. Number two, they all want to spend unprecedented amounts of money, billions and billions, more than all the stars in the universe or galaxy. And then number three, all the founder CEOs and the CEOs, they fervently believe in AI and its amazing opportunities, and they don't want to be left behind. They think the risk of not investing is much worse than investing and then losing a little bit. So that's the general environment. That's what we're going to hear from at least three of those four. The Apple folks are going to say, yeah, we're working on it. We think it's going to be amazing, but it's going to be Apple intelligence. So that's the news of the week. One of the big highlights. The second big news of the week element to talk about is OpenAI. Everyone is waiting with bated breath. The month of July is almost ended. The Verge just reported, and it's been followed up by a bunch of news outlets, that OpenAI, their long-awaited GPT-5, previously codenamed Orion, previously codenamed Strawberry, so many other things. I've written a lot about it. We'll have all those notes detailed in the show notes. But GPT-5 is supposed to be out. It's supposed to be bigger, better, brawnier, do chat stuff, reasoning stuff, agentic stuff. And one of the key things I think for mainstream users, remember, they now have over 500 million users a week, probably closer to 1 billion. And so we're now getting into mainstream user territory, and mainstream users, well, they're tired of, every time you go to one of these LLM AIs and having to pick, do I want 4.0, 3.0, this, that, and the other. And one of the big things I'm looking forward to, I don't know about you, Neil, is they're going to just simplify it and making, one size fits all, and it does everything, it figures it out, etc. And so that GPT-5 is big. The other thing about supposed to be GPT-5 feature is they're supposed to be deep into AI coding, which has been a bit hot thing. Obviously, OpenAI lost out Windsurf to Google and Cognition. We wrote about that as well. So GPT-5, Neil, are you waiting with bated breath? What do you think?
Yes. Yeah, it's been a long time coming. I think there's a lot to talk about here, not only from, of course, like a functionality and power point of view, but also how the interface is changing a bit. I know you touched on the inundation a lot of people feel with these drop-down menus whenever you end up going to a lot of these websites and these chatbots to interact and ask questions. A lot of people, regular people, just want to get their answers fast, and they don't really care or know to care about what model they're using, what are the pros and cons. So I do think the potential of GPT-5 being this router almost that's able to delegate tasks to a variety of submodels behind the scenes without really making people aware will be great for a general everyday user, my mom, dad, people like that who just want to get their answers fast. I do think, though, there is inherent benefit to having the drop down. Obviously, from a UI UX perspective, I know it's once again something that can distract from the experience. But I've had several occasions in the past, whether it's for school assignments or personal assignments, where there are certain models that definitely provide better insight, whether it's with coding. Obviously, it's been reported that coding will be one of the main buffs with this update. But where I would potentially go to an O3 versus a GPT-4 or 4.0, I mean, there's so many different variations of questions and tasks that I've kind of just trained myself to delegate to certain submodels. So that aspect will be interesting. And yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to wait till we can get this in hand, but it kind of goes hand in hand with a lot of the agentic stuff that's been recently released. I've been playing around a bit with the new agent capabilities, from doing things like cold outreach for jobs, which I'm currently in the process of trying to figure out next steps on, and even things like just ordering a coffee or things like that. It's a little peek into where all of this is going, and it'll be great to see what they end up.
No, I think all those are key observations. And the one thing I will say is this AI software versus previous AI, any kind of software, the big thing, and I've written a lot about this, variable cost. So it's not just about simplifying, you don't need to do the drop downs and the situational will figure it out. And you mentioned a big, word in there, the router aspect. The other piece of it is both these LLM AI companies have to, and users have to worry about what it's routing to, because there are different prices for reasoning versus for agentic. Those are typically higher cost items that, a typical a really complex deep research effort could be, 5, 10, 15, $20 an hour. So it's not just so your pick of the software has implications. So one of the things from a UI UX point of view, and this is your wheelhouse, Neil, is how these companies, they'll all have to figure this out. How do they communicate when it's doing things for you to tell you, hey, now we're going to need to do this other calculation over here. It's going to cost us a couple of extra pennies. Is that okay with you? That sort of thing, rather than you have to pick things or you'd ask for permission or, gives you. So there's a lot of work to be done
Yeah.
here. So it's from a UI UX point of view on this. So the variable cost piece is a key thing. It's a thing
Very
I've written a
true.
lot about. I'll put links again in the show notes. So that's a key piece. The other reason we're fixated on GPT-5 is obviously Anthropic and Google and the other dozen or so LLM AI companies around the world are in a crazy race, each one like neck and neck. And so they're all going to, do whatever GPT-5 does as quickly as possible. It'll be competing because they're all really competing for the operating system of the internet. And that leads us to our main topic of the week, which is Microsoft threw its hat in the ring, as it were, because they have a browser too. It's only 2 or 3% market share, along with Google over there with a 70% share of Chrome, and Apple with Safari, and OpenAI has a plan for an AI browser. You've written a lot of things about it. We've done shows on this, AI browsers.
Yes.
But Microsoft is edging in, as it were, into the AI browser game, because they announced that their Edge browser is going to have AI features. And
Yes.
obviously, the other dynamic here is they're also, BFF friends supposedly with OpenAI. And OpenAI has its own plans. So those two are not going to see eye to eye potentially on the AI browser side. And OpenAI is going to want everyone to use their browser versus the Edge browser. So we're going to see this dynamic. But Microsoft coming into this game is an important piece. Why? Not because of Edge, because that is, as I said, the market share is so low, but because Copilot, which is their AI vehicle, just like for Google, it's Gemini, it's pervasive on all the Windows PCs that have been sold over the last year and going forward. They will have, they all have Copilot buttons and so on. So the point is, whatever functionality they want people to have through the browser, whether it's Edge or something else, is going to be built in. So this is a broader race for operating system and so on. And to put it in mainstream terms, what this is real. Why this is important and why Neil and I constantly talk about AI browsers is not the geeky buzzwords, is because if you think about it, everything we do online goes through a browser on your mobile phone, on your desktop, or your laptop, or your iPad, tablet. It just goes through a browser. Most non-techies don't think of that. Neil, your mom, my sister, when I asked her this question, she couldn't tell you if her life depended on it. In fact, she's in a browser, she's on Google, she's on something else on her PC, because at work she uses Windows machines, at home she uses Mac. She just types something into Google and something happens. She doesn't think about browsers. But all these big companies have to think about that, and the little companies. Perplexity has a Comet browser, and browser company has Dia, and so on. They're all trying to figure out how to get to change people's core behaviors. So that's why this is something we're talking about nonstop, and we'll be accelerating our conversation on this. And Neil, I know you're chomping at the bit to talk a little bit more about this, because this is what you live and
Yeah.
breathe every day.
Yeah, I mean, I personally haven't gotten hands on yet with the Edge browser from Microsoft, but just seeing what they've done, obviously a lot of these features do exist in the existing products out there, like you touched on, whether it's Dia by the browser company or if it's Comet by Perplexity. And of course, there is this whole thing to track about OpenAI and Microsoft's relationship and how that's going to evolve over time. But I can kind of give an update here since it's a nice segue as to I recently made the switch over to Comet by Perplexity. I mentioned that a couple episodes ago, and I've been using it as a replacement for Dia, which was kind of my stopgap until there was a better one available, and it's come in the form of Comet. And it has changed the way that I've interacted with the internet, and this is stuff I've written about before. But there are a lot of times where I still find myself taking an output from the Comet assistant, cutting it and pasting it into OpenAI's ChatGPT, and getting a revised version, whether it's just cleaning up fluff or using that as a jumping off point to kind of build the rest of my query. As much as Perplexity has done a good job of integrating features and adding in, this agentic workflow, I am still waiting eagerly for OpenAI's rendition of what this will look like, because I think they do in this kind of situation, they kind of are placed in a very good way to leverage their model. Obviously, with GPT-5, like we mentioned, it'll only get better. But you kind of got to peek into that with, as I mentioned earlier, the agent feature that they recently announced, and imagining that combined in with a full browser or something. I think will unlock a lot of potential. But once again, these things are changing so fast. A lot of the features across a variety of the browsers are pretty standard now in terms of what makes an AI browser. So it'll also be an interesting thing to track what innovative new killer features, for lack of a better word, are introduced, and we'll have to just keep a tab on that.
Again, key points on this, and every day this stuff just keeps surprising us. I will tell you, just on this business of AI browsers, one of the things, I use Chrome and Safari a lot because both on desktops and mobile, but increasingly I'm finding Gemini, for instance, because I live on Google, Gmail, Docs, etc. I'm finding when Gemini can easily take results of a query and just dump it into a Google Doc, etc. That is a no-brainer. I mean, it'll say, "Do you want me to make a doc?" I say, "Yes, please." Now, Apple needs to figure that out and say, "Hey, guys, if I do something similar on Safari using Gemini or ChatGPT or whatever, it should also automatically say, "Do you want me to make a note for you on this?" We're using Apple Notes, which is one of the biggest Magilla apps for Apple on across all platforms, or do you want me to put it into their pages, that is their equivalent of Word or Google's Docs? And I guarantee you, most people, the number of people who use Apple's productivity apps, Pages or Slide, I forget all the names they have.
It's
Even
Pages, Numbers, and Keynote are the
Thank
three.
you. Thank you. And those numbers are probably equal to the number of people that use the Edge browser. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to burn. I love Apple, but it's a wake up call. And this is where it's all going. And this copying and paste results to something else and something else. The stuff needs to make it be a lot easier. And the company that's hustling the most, as you'd expect right now, is Arvind, founder CEO of Perplexity. Even before he's got permission to do this and do that, he is really hustling with Comet to provide these cross-app integration things. And he's out there trying to cut deals. So with Samsung, for instance, he's close to a deal to do these things. So the startups are going to be nipping at the heels, and the big companies have to really accelerate their action on this.
Yeah, and it's a good point you bring up before we move on to our next topic. I know we have a lot to cover, but there was an article that we had mentioned a couple episodes ago, by the information that was discussing OpenAI is looking into productivity apps and potentially releasing a few of their own. And it kind of goes back to the point we had made originally, where in the end, I think the person who's going to win, obviously everyone loves to try and predict a winner. As much as that's not the current issue at hand, I do think the person who controls the entire OS, whether it's productivity apps, mail, and these chatbots, and obviously the first companies that come to mind that have that right now are Apple and Google. Those are the only two that kind of have the entire suite of apps, whether it's messaging, phone, email, video call, and all the productivity apps also. So, there's a lot of moving parts here. And another part that you mentioned is with Irvin and Perplexity. One thing I'd mentioned, and I'm actually going to be doing a post on this in the next few days. But, one thing that kind of struck my attention when I was beginning to onboard onto Perplexity's Comet browser was that the first thing it asks you to do to really get any main functionality is relinquish your entire Google account, give it access to your email and your calendar and everything that you kind of interact with on a daily basis, which I kind of go into this in the post that I'll release in a few days, kind of talking about how people are weighing privacy in these kind of, new terms and conditions as it would be in a different light when it means getting inherent functionality that's not available anywhere else on the market. And it goes back to this, like, there's a lot of these platforms which are kind of serving as a band-aid until these bigger players are able to kind of get products out to compete. But in the meanwhile, it's just an interesting race between the incumbents and the startups that are popping up and these kind of new decisions that are having to be made from a user point of view. So a lot to stay on top of there, and we'll
No,
definitely.
I think you put your hand on your finger on the whole privacy issue, which is a big area. I've written a lot about that. Apple of the Mac 7s is the privacy halo a lot more than the others, but this is a key issue, and the issue you put your finger on, where Perplexity is asking for all Google access to Google. I'm trying a whole bunch of AI software right now, and you are as well. And one of the key things is all of these startup companies want access to everything, and you're like, wait a minute, don't think so. So this is an issue, and we're going to talk a lot more about this. This was going to be one of the things we were going to talk about in our next thing. But given time, why don't we put a pin on this? We'll come back. This is a key
Yes.
topic. It needs a lot more time to do it justice. So why don't we switch on to our read of the week
Yeah.
and or watch, because we are also now recommending a few things from a watching point of view. And Neal, you have something near and dear to my heart, which is I won't be a spoiler. So why don't you tell us? And I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to reading and to talking about this.
Yeah. So my read of the week comes from the New York Times and is titled "The Unnerving Future of AI-Fueled Video Games." It's essentially highlighting how game designers have used AI since the 1980s. This is obviously something that's been around for a very long time, but it's explaining that what used to be things like Pac-Man and NPCs and a lot of these open world games have turned into interactable people almost on these platforms, and it highlights a specific studio called Replica, which was ahead in a lot of these AI driven experiences, but was eventually pushed out of the market due to competition from a lot of these larger tech companies. The article touches on a lot of things, so I definitely won't be able to do it full justice. You should definitely go and take a read for yourself. But it not only covers a lot of the economic disruption and challenges that startups face because of how efficiency and cost from big tech are kind of playing a large role in how difficult it is for a lot of these startups to survive, with the cost of compute being so high, and that ultimately being the main factor that will drive who ends up taking, a lot of the chips in this game, for lack of better words. But the article also goes into talking about how this is evolution of, we used to have things like Pac-Man, which I obviously didn't grow up on, but I've played a lot, to NPCs in games like GTA, obviously with GTA 6 coming out soon. It'll obviously be something that's on their mind, I'm
Next year,
sure, and a lot of these playable
May
characters.
26th,
Exactly.
May 2026. I
Exactly.
know the date. I can probably tell you the hour. I'm waiting for it.
Exactly. But yeah, so it shows how people are attached to these games, and it just shows how a lot of these models and AIs being used as characters, not just as tools. Earlier, a lot of people think of AI for things like background mechanics, but now it's kind of reached the forefront of characters. But there's things like character AI, or a lot of these things we're able to create a character to interact with. In the same way, video games are also adopting this, and it'll fundamentally change the emotional tone and potentially even the immersion of people within these games. There's a lot of things like ethics and identity, obviously, in these like simulated worlds to keep in mind. Obviously, the Matrix being a big north star for what this world could look like, good or bad, through things like mass media. But it's a great article, and I think it really does a good job of just highlighting where we're at right now and the potential pitfalls of doing this, as well as a lot of the potential upsides. So go and check that out.
Subject near and dear to my heart, and also ties to our obsession of the week. So I'm going to put a pin on most of my comments here. Two things I will say in response to some of what you talked about. Number one is Replica. I've known this company for a long time. They've been around pre-generative AI, etc. They're one of the leading AI companionship type of companies, and now obviously trying to do more on the gaming side. You see Elon, we've talked about it last week, with Grok, is now literally giving companionship type of features with anime characters, female first and male, that have a lot of edgier implications as well. So yeah, AI in games is a big thing. Multiple layered onion here. cost savings for the gaming companies in terms of creating huge amounts of collateral faster, cheaper, etc. A huge amount of what you're talking about, the NPCs, the AI players you see in games, etc. GTA 5 is very, very well known for that. The GTA series, and that property, just to let people know, the Grand Theft Auto series from 1 to 5, and 5 being the big Megillah, that, and we'll update the numbers and we'll have it in the show notes. The amount of dollars that has accumulated is bigger than any movie, book, any property that you can care to name, including Star Wars, etc. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars, and this stuff is just getting started. So the field of AI in games is I think it's something that I've spent huge amount of hours. Don't tell my wife how many hours, but on just trying to figure this out. But yeah, it's a very exciting subject. So yes, please read that read of the week and Neal's post. We'll put the notes in the links in the show notes. My read of the week, again, instead of books, I have actually 3 links that I would recommend everyone look at. And the catalyst was this terrific piece in The Economist that is revisiting this business of AI and global GDP growth. There's a big debate going on in terms of AI boosting productivity, cutting costs, lots of concerns about white collar and other jobs, etc., and boosting productivity. There are economists from Goldman and others who talked about 7, 8, 9, 10% GDP growth on global basis. Let's say 125 billion a year, 125 trillion a year in GDP, growing at 5 to 10% or more. Goldman just updated their numbers. I'll put that report up in the links as well. But the core piece is not how much. It's the core is understanding the nuances. When people talk about it today, at these early days of AI, it typically, even when the experts talk about it, it comes across as a very algebraic question. Is it up or down? And what The Economist, I think, does a good job is basically show, my words, that it's a calculus problem, that there are so many variables at every level, at the high level and at the bottom up level, that this is a very difficult thing to get right from telling someone in the media or a senior politician what is going to be the impact. It's a complicated question, and I think this article is useful because it really goes into the granularity of that complexity. And I think it's important for most people who have an interest in the subject, a little bit better than the run-of-the-mill articles that I've seen on this subjects recommended. Let's move to our obsession of the week.
Yeah.
And Neal, I'll let you kick this one off, and then I have something that takes us back to gaming.
Yes. So mine comes from The Verge. It's an article titled "ChatGPT's New AI Study Mode Won't Just Give You the Answer," and it's kind of on this ongoing topic that I focus on. Obviously, just having graduated recently from college, starting off in a world where AI didn't exist, and then kind of 2-3 years in, ChatGPT blowing up onto the scene and kind of changing the way people do work, and study for tests and whatnot. Earlier, it became a crutch, I think, for a lot of people to lean on and just get answers fast. But ChatGPT has recently partnered up with students and teachers for this new study mode, which is powered by what they're calling custom system instructions that they wrote in hand with a lot of the people involved in academia. What does this mean? This means that they basically picked custom instructions because it lets the company quickly learn from real student feedback and improve the experience, even if it learns from inconsistent behavior or makes mistakes. It's essentially a push by OpenAI and hopefully by more of these LLMs to provide almost a Khan Academy like experience where we're able to learn side by side with these models rather than lean on them just to get answers fast. It's a significant interface change as well because we're used to just prompting something and getting an answer back. But this will kind of help students to work through a problem hand in hand, almost using ChatGPT as a tutor, as many do before. But now there's kind of a dedicated mode to study for this. I haven't gotten a chance to play with it yet, but it's something that once I think more people get in their hands, will find use cases that we hadn't really thought of before, as is usually the case with this type of technology. And it's something that I think is very prevalent right now. Is how is AI being used in education, and how are we kind of leveraging it? Because initially, obviously, there was a lot of pushback. People thinking it was being used to cheat and whatnot, and it's recently been embraced a bit more because it's inevitable. I think if we don't teach students to embrace these tools and use them in ways that are helpful, we're ultimately setting them up for failure just because this is where you know, not where the future is going. It's where we're at right now as a society in terms of this technology. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff in this area.
Great topic. Again, another one of these algebra to calculus kind of questions. Everyone just thinks about binary AI, cheating, education, fix it, etc. But it's a calculus. If you deploy AI correctly, it can extraordinarily boost learning, not just education in colleges and high schools, but all the way starting with kindergarten with the generation that's coming on. And so, big topic. I will also highlight, just by coincidence, this is the topic I wrote. That's my post for tomorrow. Awesome. A lot of details. So we'll put that in the show links as well. But since it's yet to be published, I won't go through that, and we can jump into. But I think this is a key obsession, and I underline this vigorously. My obsession of the week is it ties in books and videos and so on, and it gets back to this topic of games. In other words, what I've been obsessed about over the last week or so is it's a game that's been around about 4 years. It's essentially GTA 5 Grand Theft Auto in the future. It's Cyberpunk 2077. It was out 4 years ago. They've had major upgrades. So I finally started to tackle it. And with these big role-playing games, they're big time sinks. And that's one of the reasons I try and avoid them. But this weekend, I delved into it a little bit more. And it's not about the game. What I wanted to talk about is the whole genre of cyberpunk. It literally started in the early 80s. It goes back much further, actually. But it was really popularized by two authors, one books that have essentially influenced everyone who's been in the gaming world and everyone who's been in the movie world, etc. And specifically, I'm talking about William Gibson with his book Neuromancer in 1984. Then a big follow through, not related, but Neal Stephenson with his book Snow Crash in the 90s. And then, of course, that epic movie Blade Runner with Ridley Scott of Alien fame, nothing to do with this one. But all of this basically depicted worlds that are getting rapidly urbanized. So now today we have so many big cities, especially in Asia, that are 10, 20, 30 million people, huge amount of rural populations coming to these urban areas. And you can see it in New York, you can see it in San Francisco as well, in the US, etc. But massive widening of the economic gap between the haves and the have-nots, that capital can with advancing technology can accelerate relative to everybody else from an economic point of view. These are big societal issues. It points to many of the things that are going on today in terms of the polarization on politics, both here, etc., the nationalism, the we don't want your trade kind of stuff, etc. And so what is being depicted in these books and movies is literally what we are living through. And it's very, very important to kind of get through. And so my obsession is not just the game. The game gives you a visual milieu of understanding what this feels like. We've seen it in all these books. We're seeing it in Cyberpunk 2077. But there was a specific video that was done by a group called Epic Opaque, which I'll again have the link. It's a 15, 20-minute video. And they ask a very interesting question and try and answer it subjectively, asking where today's world in 2025, are we in this global move towards a world that is cyberpunkish? And they have a number. I think they're a little bit too high, actually way too high. But I hope, we're on the lower end. In other words, more on the 20, 30% level rather than the 50% way there to cyberpunk that's depicted, this dystopian world in the future. And so this is an obsession of mine, not just because games and science fiction, but it's literally what we're living through. It's in our geopolitics, it's in our politics, it's in our polarization, and it's in our fears of technology and AI, it's in our aspirations and hopes. You can just see it every time the top AI founders talk about AI. One of them will say, "Oh, it's going to be amazing, and you're going to be able to educate and do all these other things, solve health problems, solve cancer." And then in the same breath, they will say, "Oh my God, but there's a 10, 20% chance it may kill us all. It's existential." You listen to the other side of it, and it'll, basically get everyone out of a job and so on. The same founders, same time. And so that is very, very complex, concerning for regulators, for regular people, etc. And that's why this tech wave more than any other, is more feared by mainstream people than ever before they've even had to try any AI thing. And that is kind of this whole cyberpunk world. So I just wanted to underline that, most of our technologies are born from our field, from sci-fi. And so this is why it's an obsession that I wanted to talk about. And thank you
Great.
for listening on that. So with that, I think we're going to cap our show today. Thank you again for joining us for episode 14 of AI Ramblings. Again, as usual, questions, comments, suggestions, thoughts, please let us know. As usual, please like and subscribe, especially Neal's new Substack, because he's going to have new posts, as he just said. And again, as usual, thank you again for joining us, and stay tuned.
We'll see you next time. Thanks.